It's not the first time that South Africa will enter an ICC tournament with expectation that they should come home with silverware, and it won't be the first time that people will be surprised if they don't. It's Gary Kirsten's last time in charge of the national team as they head to the Champions Trophy. They've already won this one before, remember, back in 1998, and they'll be wanting to win it again to bid Kirsten farewell and to show that they can claim ICC silverware. But it's going to be tough for a team that's in a serious state of transition, especially in the one-day game. Well, South Africa will be without two major pillars of strength in Graeme Smith and Jacques Kallis, and perhaps it's the exclusion of the latter that's going to be the most focused on as the tournament develops. Kallis, as we all know, is a two-in-one player. He offers a lot with the bat, but he's also that fifth bowler that South Africa have so often called on and that has so often taken wickets, actually. And without him, South Africa will need somebody to fill that number 3 position, and in all likelihood, Ryan McLaren will take the place of the all-rounder. So Ryan McLaren's not all that experienced in international cricket. He's in his 30s, which means he's certainly got age experience, but he doesn't have match time experience, and he hasn't played in a major tournament before. This is a big ask of a man that's usually sat on the sidelines and been on the fringes of the South African squad. Graeme Smith's absence has opened the door for Alvaro Peterson to come into the side, and this is also an interesting inclusion because Peterson is not known for being a one-day player. He's played a handful of ODIs for South Africa, and he hasn't done too well. Of course, we know that he's done very well in the test format, but an interesting one, I think he was picked more actually on his county form, and he scored loads of runs for Somerset in the early stages of the English season than he was on his reputation as a one-day player. And poor old Henry Davids, who's the in-form opening batsman at the Titans, must be feeling pretty upset about this. So it'll be an interesting combination, Peterson and Hashim Amla, both of them known for being quite conservative starters, not necessarily out there to get South Africa off to the quickest and most blazing start possible, but that's what Andrew Hudson says he wants. He says he would prefer to be 50 for 2 after 10 or 12 overs than to be 10 for 2 after 2 overs. And I suppose that makes sense. South Africa want to build slowly and keep wickets in hand so the likes of AB de Villiers, Faf du Plessis, JP Duminy can come in and score the runs at the end. That middle order is interesting. We'll have Colin Ingram at number 3 in all likelihood. He'll be filling Kallis's very big shoes, and it'll be a tough ask for Colin Ingram, who's matured a little bit over a period of time but is still relatively inexperienced. Then Faf du Plessis and JP Duminy. On paper, those sound like great names to have in your middle order, but let's bear in mind that they haven't played much cricket. Du Plessis had a back injury, which kept him out of the series against Pakistan, the last 2 matches, and he didn't get any game time in the IPL because of Mike Hussey's unbelievable form. So he's coming in cold. And JP Dumini's been out for 6 months with a ruptured Achilles tendon. He hasn't played at all. He's been recalled to the squad, and he's got no game time under his belt whatsoever. So these two are coming in cold. Of course, AB de Villiers will have a massive role to play. David Miller could feature as well, but Robin Peterson and Ryan McLaren will be required to score some big runs at the end because they're the two all-rounders. Bowling is a little bit more settled for South Africa. They've got Dale Steyn, and we all know what he can do. Morné Morkel, who's also been a good partner to Steyn in the one-day format as he has in the test format, and a really resurgent Lonwabo Tsotsobe, who's actually been spending time working with his new franchise, the Lions, in the nets. Lopsy hasn't played much cricket. He also wasn't part of the IPL. He hasn't been on the county circuit. But he's been making a real effort. He wants to get quicker. He wants to get better. And importantly, he wants that number 1 ranking back. So to have Tsotsobe, a hungry Tsotsobe, rather than just a sort of, Tsotsobe that doesn't really care what's going on, that's going to be very important as well. The spinner will be Robin Peterson. We know what he can do. We've seen him mature excessively over the last 2 or 3 years. He's experienced, he knows what this is all about. So there, I don't think South Africa will have any problems. But the balance of the side will be important, especially without Jacques Kallis, and I think it's an absence South Africa will miss as the tournament goes on. Well, Gary Kirsten was signing off at the end of this tournament, and obviously it's one that he'll want to win to cap off a legacy that's included taking South Africa to number 1 on the test rankings. But an interesting point, and Daryl Cullinan actually mentioned it to me the other day, is that perhaps the emotion of Gary Kirsten leaving will overwhelm the South African side, and they'll have to be careful for that not to happen. He's got his assistant and successor, Russell Domingo, with him. He's a pragmatic, straightforward kind of guy, and he'll want to use this as a little bit of a transition phase, having Gary there, and he's taking over for a limited over series in Sri Lanka, so this is a good opportunity for him to get all the little details he needs to get from Gary before he takes over the national team. I think for the players, they'll be absolutely determined to send Gary Kirsten off in a good way. They've all benefited from his time with them, and they've all only got good things to say about him. But whether this little sideshow is going to distract South Africa is, I think, going to be pretty important. You know, they're always under pressure in a big tournament, and suddenly they're under even more pressure, because if they let Gary Kirsten go and they choke again, it's not going to look so good, especially when people reflect on his time with the national team. So it's a tough question for South Africa to answer, and they'll have to battle with their own feelings as the tournament goes on.